Alright, so we're going to keep on cleaning this up, and once we've looked at every single file and cleaned up what we think needs cleaning up, then we're going to be done for the day, because there's only so much motivation I have in a given day. So let's try to figure out how to go through these in the correct order, right? And to go through these in the correct order, we can look at the main C file that compiles everything together. And we kind of see this order: FileBoy, native keys, iKeybox, iMousebox, current editor, GinaWin for graphics and window, DUI, dialog UIs, GLBind, CPU, it's CPU uniforms, but the U is kind of shared. Gradient quad, a free spot, fragbed, GPU data, pixel name, and paint 5D. So let's look at this first one, FileBoy, and see what we can find. And also, I'd like to look at the data first. So let's put the actually, no, it can be over here like this. Yeah, okay. So let's look at the data first. So we have the data file right here. Let's take a look at it. No associated data. Okay, just functions. That's fine with me. Let's look at the functions. So I don't know how I want to do this. I guess let's open up another identical folder on the other side here, so that we can kind of move back and forth really easily. Okay, so except I don't know which is left and which is right. That's not okay, let's swap this so that they're left and right, they correspond to each other. That would make a little bit more sense and make it a little bit easier to navigate here. And then, is this also left and right, or is that also swapped? Okay, so this order here of these two is swapped, so we need to drag these and drag this. We need to swap those around, so everything is kind of lined up and intuitive, right? And that means this, we're going to have to move this over here now. And data then functions anyways, yeah? Okay, this file, that file, this, and that. Okay, so that's good. So let's look at the functions for let's look at the functions for this FileBoy. FileBoy manages file system access. We have a basic little halt function. Make one directory. Make dir. Okay, and we have all this stuff. So I think the most useful thing I think I could do looking at this is just kind of build a, if we could build an index of kind of what is in here, looking at the function documentation. So let's go into the F for files, and let's just build a nice little index here of what's in here, right? And okay, so inside here, let's just oh. Okay, so let's just start up our clipboard stack and just kind of cut and paste everything. So CS start to start our clipboard stack, and then we're just going to copy all of the function names here. So I'm going to copy this function name, and I'm going to copy this one, and this one. Wow, that's a doozy. I think the reason this is so long is that it yeah, it can create directories as well. So we're gonna touch our touch file command is gonna look for directories that exist as well. So we're going to do a little CS dump right here, and we're going to just dump the index of like everything that's in there. And you know, this is kind of like, do we really need these, all of this prefix stuff, or is this just like visual chatter? Is it important that we have, I don't think it's important that we have these prefixes, because right now we're not going to give an explanation of everything it does, so I don't know. So I feel like just keeping a nice little summary of what's here makes more sense to me. It is kind of like, well, what if we want an explanation of what this does? Well, you're going to have to look for the explanation in the right place. Now, the problem with removing the prefixes is that now if we try to do a grep for the entire name, we're never going to find these little summaries, right? But I think that we should probably just keep the function, the documentation kind of simple. Like touch can work with retired directory paths. So touch file works with made-up path names. Make a directory. And making a directory is just making a folder, so we'll make a note of that. Make one directory. What is the difference between make-dir and make one directory, right? That seems kind of weird. So let's see what the difference is, because that initially... Uh-huh. Oh, got ya. Okay, so just a little example, right? So I use EX for example, even though it would be properly named EG, just because I'm not that good enough to use EG and EI correctly, right? Because EG is for example, and then EI is what the hell does EI stand for? Oh, EI is in other words, right? EI versus EG. EG versus EI. So, EG, example. And then, so a little note, I'm just making a note here. So over here, I'm just making notes. So EG versus EI. EG is example, because it stands for some weird Latin thing, exempli grata. Gratia, whatever, I don't know. EI is something else, so let's look that up really quick. EI stands for... Actually, I might already have that. Let's see if we do EI. No. Employment insurance. First, it's not EI, it's... Oh yeah, it's IE. So, you mean EI. And if we do EI, we don't get anything. So, or IE, sorry, IE. IE, hashtag IE. So IE, first of all, it's not EI, it's IE. ID id est, which approximately is to... IE is id est, which means approximately, that is to say. Okay. So let's take this. So IE. Good enough for me. And so it's EI and then EG. IE and EG. So you mean IE versus EG. Or... Okay, so let's make a note of that. And then it is... So it's IE, like Internet Explorer, versus EG. Or it could be EG, like, I don't know, Exempla Grata, whatever, versus IE. And then let's make the underscored version of those. So, EI versus EG, EG versus EI, IE versus EG, EG versus IE. Okay, and make sure those are all unique. Okay, so EI is, which means IE, and then EG. Exempli grata, which approximately for the sake of example. Okay. And do we have an EG already? Do we have an EG? Yeah, we already have an EG, so let's not worry about that. Okay. And then maybe in other words, IE. Already have that. Okay, that's good. Do we have a for example? If we do for example, in other words, for example, right? So we already have shortcuts for that. Okay, cool. So the thing is that even though that's the way it is, I never get that right, so we're just going to use EX for example, and we're not going to worry about doing proper Latin abbreviations here, because I can't, yeah, nope, can't wrap my mind about it. So make one directory does, right, it's make one directory, whereas this makedir function is more than one folder, right? And so I think I use it like this somehow. Good enough for the documentation for now. A halt, program with message. Okay, so that's good to me. I think that's good enough for documenting this system. So let's go back here and look at what we got. So now we got native keyboard. So let's go close this and go open and native keyboard. Let's look at the data first. Actually, let's look at, yeah, let's always do data then functions. So let's move this over here, because this is the data. And then, oh, great, but now we lost our editor when we did that. God damn it. So let's move this back over here. Okay, so are these the corresponding tabs? Yes, they are. And we're going to take the data documentation here, and we're going to put it over here. And then we can put the data file over here. So, right, the data on the left, for the data source on the left, function source on the right is what I want to do. Or data source on the left, and then the data documentation on the right. So, there is no documentation for native keyboard. That's fine. Okay, let's look at the functions for native keyboard. So, in our library, okay, and we have a little function. There's only one function in here, so this one won't be taking too long to document. And let's put them in the order that they are linked together in the source code. So native key, natty key dot f. And let's just create another divider for that. And I'll just take this and put that over there. Okay, so let's open up our clipboard stack and just start taking every function that is in here. So I don't know why I did that, because there's only one function, right? And it's pretty dead simple, right? And so we can just take it like that and just say it's basically Windows weirdness to AZ or 09, right? So dead simple. We're not even going to worry about binding other keys besides that, like the special character keys. We're not going to worry about if the key is uppercase or lowercase. We are just going to say, if it's one of these keys, we'll do numbers. If it's one of these things, then we'll do letters. So these hex codes are based on our Windows specific. So this is just to get like an adapter layer to separate us from some of the Windows specific components. So as we're building code, we don't have to later on, like if we ever want to port this, we have a clear division between where that native code, platform code is, and the code that is not platform specific. We want a nice... Huh?
You gonna leave your weights in front of the thing where people are gonna...
Oh, sorry, I didn't see them there.
You should take care of them real quick.
Okay. Stop making that face.
What, this face?
Yeah, that face.
You don't like this face? What?
All right, so let's see what else we got here. Okay, so that's pretty simple. We look at it, makes sense. We can move on, right? So we've looked at the native key stuff. Let's close that, and let's look at the data first. So let's see, what is next here? Next on the list is ikeybox. So let's go to ikeybox and see what the hell that is. And look at the data. And the data here is it dirty and then just the key that was pressed, right? So right now we're keeping it dead simple. Alright, so we can extract that comment into our documentation here. So over here we can do a ikeybox, right? Dot data. Create a little section for that, and then we will take this, paste it over there. Okay, so this section right here. So the most recent non-control key pressed. Right, so the comment really all we need right here is, you know, keep right, so basically that's all we're doing. And then over here we can just take this comment right here and we can just say actually this comment is a hashtagged comment, so it actually belongs, it doesn't actually belong here. So let's go open up our hashtagged comments. Right, so we got this here, and we're just going to say, we're going to put that in there, and this is, let's start adding those underscores so we can see the division a little bit easier. I like the underscores just to give us some breathing room when we're trying to read these sections. So keep press dead simple for now. And then we can also, you know, put the original kind of code that it was for right there. And yeah, that I'm good with that. And let's make sure that this actually matches directly. So keep key press dead simple for now. After you've consumed the keyboard events, mark all ikeybox data as dirty. Mark I okay, and then over here we can take that comment and we can put that over here, and we can kind of do the same thing where we'll just take the line of code that corresponds to and we'll just put that in here like that, right? And if we want to know, right, and those little tags should be enough information to go off of, right? For example, keep dead simple for now. That's good enough. Now, if we want like a long-winded explanation of, you know, why are we keeping it dead simple, we can look at this other file and have information on what that is. But besides that, we just don't want to have a whole bunch of clutter, right? And the next part is, well, what about this? So ikeybox, what is it? A PO box for keys that were pressed. Why? Mitigate multi-threading problems, right? So this is a summary, right? So this is more of a summary. It doesn't have to do with the data or the functions. It's just a summary. So we're going to go open our summary documentation. So in the summary file here, and we'll put that there, right? because that is what this is. So I key box, input key box. We can keep that little header, and then we can just call this, we can go here like this, we can go I key box dot D plus F. Okay. And then we can take this and we can cut it from here, paste it over on this side. Okay, so now we have this section for the I key box. I think this D plus F is getting a little bit ugly. I think we're gonna not do that. So hold on. So this little, we only need to store one key for now. Sure, we can just keep that. We've trimmed it down enough. Let's change the formatting a little bit, because I think that it's a little cluttered. And it just doesn't look like, I get that, you know, it's usually data and functions, but it's not, the systems aren't always data and functions. And since that's like being repeated every single time, it loses its meaning as a piece of useful information. And really all we want these to be is nice, clean section dividers. And this is really wrecking the cleanliness of the section dividing. So let's knock out that habit and say that was a bad idea in retrospect, even though we just started doing that today, and we already did something that was too verbose. So I have a habit of just getting too verbose. So I have to wind things back every once in a while. So yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, I like this little summary. You know, it's a little bit long for a summary, but I think it's just the amount that's needed. So we'll keep it like that, right? And then in here, the data, right? We've kind of taken that and ikeybox.data. So in the data, we're just going to keep like little summaries of all the variables, right? So in the data documentation, we just want a list of all of the variables, and you know, when greater than or equal to 1 marks keybox okay. Key press. Okay, current key pressed is ASCII char, so that's good enough for me. Now, part of me wants to just do it like this, where we have the summaries down here. But this is kind of verbose. I'd say until we get things that are actually multi-line, I think doing it like this, we'll do it like this. But the idea is we want a compacted list where there's like one item per line, so we can have like a good overview of exactly what's in there by just taking a glance at this, right? Okay, so let's look at the functions for this. So let's open up let's go over here. Let's do ikeybox functions. And for looking at the functions, let's go to the function documentation. And we're just going to take all these functions and we're just going to build like a little index. And also we'll see that this what and why, this is already in our documentation. It was just a duplicated comment, so we can get rid of that. And now we'll go. Let's look at our list. So ikeybox is after native key. Okay, good. So I key box is after native key, so we'll go over here and we'll go I key box. And then we'll make another section. So yeah, that white space really helps to make this clear. Another thing is you'll notice that I don't really have a lot of like IntelliSense kind of stuff going on. And the idea is I want to make this code very clear without any special highlighting. And if it's clear without highlighting, then it'll be even clearer if you're going to use your own syntax highlighting on it. That's kind of the reason why I'm doing it like this. So for iKeybox, we're going to take everything and put it in there. But before we do that, once again, I think there's too much visual clutter by putting the .f at the end. We know kind of what file we're in because we see all these f's spammed all over the place. And we can remove this .f. We already know that's what this is about. And having a little padding right there, I think really makes those section dividers make them a little bit clearer to see where they are. Okay, so now that we have that, let's use our clipboard stack, and let's take all of these function names. So copy, 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 and copy. Okay, so then right here we'll do just a CS dump. And we'll take these and we'll get rid of the prefixes. Explicitly stating no initialization. Okay, that's what an done is. Are the okay. Returns. Okay, so that's basically what we're doing. Right, so we're just trying to take all of this verbosity, right? There's verboseness, and just put it into a nice, cleaner format where we see everything that's there. And we have a nice higher level overview, right? Okay, so we've got that. We got the functions. We did data, then we did functions. So now we can move on to whatever's next. So let's go back to our main file here. I'm going to see that iMouseBox is next. So we're going to open it up in this editor first. So let's go to iMouseBox.data. We're going to look at the data first. Data, then functions. That's the order we're going to keep. And okay, and then we'll open up our data documentation over here. And we want this after iKeybox, iMouseBox, or iMouseBox, right? So we're trying to keep everything to exactly 7 letters, just because being OCD and just keeping everything as regular as possible. So iMouseBox. Okay, and then why don't we clean up, before we get going here, let's clean up some of this again, right? We don't need this .d. We have this string of d's to know where we are. So let's kind of keep on doing that. Now this is kind of ugly. Do you want to keep it like this, or do you want to say, you know, paint 5D, right? I don't know. I do like the fact that all this highlights when you click it, and then this is kind of missing because it has GPU data paint 5D. But maybe that can establish that there's something wrong and that it's breaking a pattern. I don't know. Maybe I'll change that, but for now let's just keep it like that. Okay, and so we have a lot of stuff in here. Let's just activate the clipboard stack and do CS start and just grab all of these. So copy that, 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 and then we'll do a CS dump, and we should have like two of everything should be in nice little pairs here. And what I think is that since these are all like paired very nicely, that there's no need to like waste all this extra space here. I think we should just do MX, MY, like that. And we should do the same thing for all of these, right? And that's just because I think it would be just a little bit more concise, and we just want a nice concise overview of what is in here. We don't care if it's completely grammatically correct, right? If we wanted to be completely grammatically correct, we could just use some type of header file. But then, even then, I don't really want to use a header file because I want to enforce a strict ordering. And if I use header files, then strict ordering goes out of the window because now we can declare functions in different orders because we effectively have forward declarations if we use header files. So that is good there. So we can also make the mouse XY. This is going to be click XY. And this is mouse up XY. And we'll just do like up XY, mouse up, and this one here is down, right? Down. And then this last one is hold on. So dy oh, wait, so these should not be together like that. So these aren't XY, so let's not put these together. Let's put these separately because they're not really, they kind of are. So we could group them like this. We could say is mouse down, is mouse up. So it might be a bad idea to have these two variables that basically, if these are both 0, that would be an error. If these are both 1, that's an error. That might be a bad idea to have these two variables that we now have to like keep in sync. But for now, I think that is, I'm happy with that. I'm not gonna worry about it. Let's keep the indentation kind of consistent there. And the commentary, is the commentary in here necessary, or do you want to strip it down and throw everything in here again? I think that we're gonna take that verbose commentary and I think we're going to move it over here, just because I think that adds some more clutter, and we're trying to get it to where comments on code, we want to keep most of that separate, just so that when we already know what these variables mean and we don't need a refresher, we don't want these explanations to like be adding more lines of code that are going to like distract us from what's going on, right? We can keep these logical groupings. Look, and we already have these descriptions here, so it's not like we need even more, right? Like I think we went a little bit overboard here when we were explaining this, right? Because look, we're kind of like redoing all of this again. So I think it was, I think we just went like a little bit crazy, and I think this is fine. Like we can, since this space isn't, this is just like free space anyways, we can keep that. Like I want to maximize the vertical space, and I want to maximize the horizontal space. So rather than this being blank, let's use that for something, and let's keep those comments there, right? We can just do explained in more detail. Alright, we could just do it like that. Right, like click XY probably makes sense, but if you want like a verbose explanation, right? So there's still some advantage to having it like that. This is the documentation section, so we're not going to worry too much about being overly verbose because it's the documentation section. That's where we're allowed to be verbose. It's just that over here we want to check ourselves when we do that. So like globe Eve object from, so this is just a little note for me. Now, I know what that's about. I don't know if that's going to be helpful for anyone else. So should it really be taking up that much space, or should we offboard that? So I think we should probably offboard that. So we'll do like glow Eve object in A2JC. Okay, that's a very confusing kind of looking comment there. But then when we go to our hashtag comments, we can put that there. And all you gotta do is select it in your editor, and then search for it if you really need, if you're really curious about what that is, right? And then we can take this comment, which was taking up way too much space, right? Because we got all these weird symbols and stuff, and we can clean that down a little bit, right? Glow Eve equals global event a generic system/platform agnostic event object. Okay. Thought event to specific and input event oh Okay, so there's an explanation of like why I use those names, and it's like a lot of way too much explanation, but you know, if you want to know the thought process, we have the thought process documented there somewhere where you can find it, right? So that's a lot cleaner. And then also this input I mouse box, this would be a summary, and it's a lot like the previous summary. So let's take this summary for I mouse box. And does it have? Is it the exact same thing? Allowed. So really, we could keep this a little bit simpler, and we could say that I mowbox, and we could do. We can make a note here rather than repeat this ridiculously big chunk of explanation, right? we can say exact same what and why as keybox, but for mouse stuff instead of keyboard. Okay, right, so that's our summary, right? A nice little short summary. Rather than do all this stuff and say that again, we're just going to say exact same what and why as ikeybox. If we select ikeybox here, we can see it highlight, we can find that. But for mouse instead of keyboard, right? Now, I don't know if mouse should be, you know, in quotes. I don't know. We could do this instead of keyboard. We could do brackets to like highlight it like that. I don't know. We still want it to be clickable, so, but for mouse stuff instead of keyboard, right? Good enough for me. So then let's go back to the data here. So now we can effectively kind of like remove this, right? And just be like, bam, don't worry about it, right? If you really don't know what the hell this does, you can check the documentation, but hopefully maybe the names here and all that will be kind of enough to go off of, right? So let's look at the functions for it. So let's go open up in the library. We'll do iMailbox, and we'll look at the functions now. And we want the function code on the right. And we see this exact same cut and paste header here, which is adding clutter. And we already kind of like we already put this in the common summary, so we can get rid of that and just be like, there, we're done there, right? And then within our function code here, iMouseBox comes after iKeybox, so we'll do iMouseBox functions. And we'll put these over here. And then we only have one function, right? So we'll just put it over here. And it just has an init none right now. Now, there's no like marking it as dirty and whatnot that's in the other stuff. But we're not going to add any functions that we think that we might need. And because there is an init none and explicitly no initialization code, right? So that's what this is. Init none is just a pattern we're using, just because it's important that we know what's in the code, but it's also important what's not in the code. Like you have a block of code where you say, if this, do that, if this, do that, and then if this, do nothing, right? That do nothing is important. It's a lot of times we see why we did things, but a lot of times in the code we don't see why we did not do something, right? Because it's kind of, you got to take a little bit more effort to document why you did not do something, and sometimes it takes being kind of like unconventional to kind of like do that, right? So I like to be explicit in what I do, but I also like to be explicit in what I omit, right? So I want to be as explicit as possible. Maybe that's just a personality aspect because I'm just so I'm very verbose, right? I talk too much, right? I'm not concise. But I just think that more information is better than less information, but it's also good to have that information kind of like correctly organized so that you can access exactly the amount of information you want and access it easily, right? So let's continue. So we looked at the functions, and so that must mean that we already looked at the data, correct? Because we're always doing data, then functions, because functions always depend on data. And yes, we already looked at the data for the iMouseBox. So when we look at the function documentation, we have iMouseBox in there. And then when we look at the data documentation, iMouseBox, are you in there? Yep, so we did that. We're good. Let's close iMouseBox and move on to the next item, right? And we're just trying to get, rather than kind of be overwhelmed about all this code that we have no fucking clue what it does anymore, we're just going to go through the code and just clean it up, right? We're just going to take some time to clean up this code. And that's going to like reduce some of the shock of, oh god, I don't remember what this code I did a month ago does, right? Like, I wrote this a month ago, I don't remember what it does. How are we gonna get over the shock of being bombarded with this huge project and being like, get back into it? Okay, how the hell are we gonna get back into it? Well, it's gonna take a large time commitment to figure out where we left off. So if it's going to take a time commitment anyways, why don't we get an extra bonus of figure out where we left off, but also, you know, clean stuff up and make it even nicer than when we last left it, right? So let's look in our library chain here. So after we include the iMouseBox, we want to include this thing called C_editor, which stands for current editor, right? So we got these nice little succinct comments. We don't have much column space because you know, this is a little bit verbose here, but it's nice because this forces us to be as terse elevator pitches, right? We can't give a long-winded explanation about what all these things are. Just give the elevator pitch for what these are, right? So hopefully, just these names can be elevator pitches in themselves. Right? Even though they're very terse, they're unique enough to where they kind of give a hint about what they're about, right? File boy, native key, probably native key. iKeybox is kind of weird, but it means input key box. It's not interface, it just means input mouse box, not interface. But anyways, macro, I just like to... One of the worst things about macros is when you are dealing with macros and you don't know you're dealing with macros. And to solve that problem, anytime I use a macro that is not like declared, used, and then undeclared, right? Define the macro, use the macro, and then undefine it right away. If it's not used like that and it has a much longer scope, a much longer lifetime, then I want the literal word macro in my macro. Or alternatively, I sometimes will do it shorthand, so MAC for macro as well. But I just want to absolutely make sure that I know that I'm looking at a macro, right? Now, sometimes I can be kind of confused. I'm like, this Mac prefix, should it come before the namespace or should it come after the namespace? And that was kind of confusing. And I decided that macro is kind of a sub-namespace in a way. And I'm trying to keep everything as uniform as possible. And I'm thinking, well, if somebody is looking at my code, if somebody somehow uses this code, I don't know how you would use it in another project, but let's code it as if it could be included in another project just to have good habits. Well, we don't want to impose too much of a cognitive payload on somebody else who is using our huge project, right? So we just want to, to reduce cognitive payload on other people who are using our project, we want like all of our public structs and all of our public functions, we want them all to start with this namespace here. And then I do the same thing with my private stuff as well, because there's not really public and private in C code. You can use the static keywords so that the compilation unit doesn't export the symbols, but it's not really private, right? So namespace all capitals means it's public. Namespace all lowercase means that it's private. And what is public, what is private? That's a loosey. I may be flying kind of loosey-goosey with what I consider public, what I consider private. But I just find that it's better to do it that way than to like create all these wrappers and things for getters and setters. It just I don't want to end up in a getter setter hell like in Java programming. So we're not gonna, right? If your getter and setter just gives back a value that you're wrapping, you're not really encapsulating anything. You're just making weird convoluted work for yourself. Now the reason you'll do that in business programming is because business programming, if you're like starting up like a enterprise application that needs to run 24/7, and you need to make changes to it, you can't afford to be breaking things, right? So in enterprise programming, because not breaking things is a very high up priority, you end up doing a lot of wrapping your code with getters and setters and doing like a lot of adapter patterns that makes the code clunky as hell, and it's fucking annoying, and I hate it. But even though you hate it, you gotta understand that there is always a reason for why different professions are writing their code in a certain way. And that way is not necessarily wrong. It's just this is the style that has evolved out of some type of necessity based on the problem space of the problem that needs to be solved, right? Anyways, so now that I've ranted, let's actually figure out where we are again. So C editor, right? So data on the left, functions on the right. So let's go into here and let's open up C editor. So this is active and C editor. Okay, and we'll open up the data file first because functions depend on data. And this looks a lot like a little hashtag comment I just wrote a while ago. And the good thing is that it has the exact same thought process that I used earlier. So if we go into our hashtag comments, you can probably find it. Yeah, so this comment right here, keypad hashtags, right? See one-to-one editor relationship. So same mindset here where, well, not the same mindset exactly, right? Because this is the actual number keys. But yeah, the dex for the editor, dex eddy, basically means the active editor, the editor in focus. This is just a variable to flag what systems should have control depending on what editor we're using. So remember, the whole system here is going to be editor-centric. So we're trying to write a game, but we're going to revolve everything around editors, right? So to keep everything kind of self-contained, every time we have some type of new thing we want to look at, like if we have a different, and so let's think about model view controller, right? You have a model, which is your data. You have a view, which would be like your rendering code. And then you have your controller, which is like, clicking on a canvas and getting some behavior back, like some user inputs and whatnot. Now, that's a good pattern. I've used it before. Now with controller, usually I split controller into two different sections. So there's a pragmatic controller, right, which is just the functions that need to be called. And then there's a user controller. And the user controller deals with how does the controller interface with the user? Because usually there's some type of logic where you have to think about mouse positions, keyboard presses, things like that. And you need that in a user controller, and then you need to separate the all the commands that get fired into a pragmatic controller, right? And that way you can reuse the controller. You can plug that controller into AI or into some type of procedural generation without any extra work because you separated those concerns. So model view and controller, I think of it as more as model view, user controller, and pragmatic controller, or user controller, computer controller, I don't know what you're going to call it, but I split it up like that when I use model controller. But the problem is with model view controller is that very rarely do I find myself actually making another view for the same data, right? Or a different controller for the same data, right? Different data, different problem, okay? Now, in some cases, like with a polygon mesh, we could render as flat polygons, or we could render as solid-sided. We could render as flat polygons, or we could render as a wireframe, right? So the model is the polygons, and then the view, you could have two different views. You could have a polygon view and then a wireframe view, right? So in that case, you would have two different views for the same data. But most of the time when I'm doing something, I never have two views for the same data, right? Because it's a time limitation thing. I don't have enough time to like be doing that, right? I want to move on after I have a view that confirms I'm looking at the data that I think I'm looking at. Then I'm good, right? Move on. Same thing with a controller. Why am I going to make another controller for the same manipulating the same exact data set? So that separation of concerns with model view controller is nice, but the downside of it is you're creating all of these like reusable components for, oh, maybe eventually I'm going to add another view, or maybe I'm eventually going to add another controller, and you never do it. So I feel like model view controller kind of goes against the Yagni principle. Yagni being you aren't gonna need it. So I think that model view controller is a good, conceptually it's good to think of separating everything like that, but in terms of coding the design pattern like that, I think it just fractionates your code. It adds extra surface area to your code. So I think it's a good way to conceptualize things, but in practice, it's usually a bad idea to just jump from model view controller. Unless you specifically have a project in mind where you're like, there's going to be 1,000 different views to the same data set, right? Like maybe you have, maybe the whole project is about different ways to view the same data, right? And then definitely model view controller, reusable views, yes. But as far as we're going, we're not going to do that. Also because if we do model view controller with that kind of implies that we don't need a one-to-one-to-one relationship between everything, that we can swap out those different components. And I really want to keep a one-to-one relationship with everything just out of simplicity. So anyways, let's look at this code, and I guess let me just read through it, and then figure out where I'm going to put this summary, because I don't think I want to keep it in here. And actually, let's open up the current editor functions and see if this comment has been duplicated, and because that's also important to know, right? So ceditor.f, so the functions, so data on the left, functions on the right. So I see, nope, it's only right here. And let's read about it. So currently the project is set up to use 9 different shaders that each activate when the corresponding number key is pressed. For example, pressing 3 loads fragment shader number 3 into our pipeline. Let's build upon this. So number key 1 equals active frag shader 1. The dex eddy, the active editor index, is 1, right? And then same thing for all of these other things, right? So when you select a certain number, the active editor index is going to match the active frag shader, right? So we're going to have a one-to-one relationship between the number key that was pressed, which frag shader we're using, and the editor index. And so when I say frag shader, basically we're going to render all of our code just using fragment shaders. So we're going to use, there's a variety of rendering things I want to do. Part of me doesn't want to get into the details because I'm like, oh, I really want to see if I can patent this because I have a really unique idea. And the other part of me is like, maybe I shouldn't because, as long as you have a head start on the project and you're well documenting it, then you're the first to do it. It doesn't matter if it's patented or not because you're like the first, right? So let's say like Minecraft, right? It really doesn't matter if they have a patent or not on a cube building game, right? Because they were the first, they're well established, they you win, right? Because you were the first to do it, right? Now, I guess that could bite you, but I mean, look at Doom and like open sourcing their engines. So I think that that you can be kind of afraid to like share what you're learning, but I think the best thing to do is just expose the whole process, and that will also give me really detailed documentation as to the thought process, help me kind of crystallize the thought process. Okay, let's see what else is here. When 0 is pressed, no conceptual sub-editor is in focus. Maybe when that happens, the keyboard will only respond to keys 0 through 9 because there is no editor in focus to listen to what keys were pressed. And actually, that makes sense to me. If no editor is in focus, then the only keys that should work are the keys that decide if an editor is in focus. And the idea for that is we don't want a whole bunch of code and like a main editor and then to have all of these be like sub-editors. We really want the main editor to be more like a editor switchboard, right? Okay, so in just one variable, and it's the editor index, right? So current editor, right? So it's a big way to, right? This is more comment than it is code, which is, that is very common for what I do. So let's offboard some of this. So this is more of a, yeah, this is more of a summary. It's kind of long, but the thing is that I'm looking at this and I'm saying, does this apply to functions? Does it apply to data? Or does it kind of apply to both? And I think it kind of applies to both because it's an overall idea of how the system is used. It's not really, yeah. I think it belongs in the summary. Now we could. We could make a shorter summary and then offboard this into our hashtagged comments. So let's look at the summary documentation. And let's go down to, so C editor comes after iMouseBox. So let's go over here and go C editor. And let's make an entry here, right? So and keeps track of the current editor for more info, see So we're just gonna put a date on this because, you know, maybe there's going to be more design notes later, but keeps track of the current editor in control, right? Yeah, sure, why not? And then we'll go over to our hashtagged comments, and we'll just keep on adding things in here. And also, let's keep on putting an underscore before things, just because that makes it a little bit yeah, that's a little bit verbose, but I think it just makes it easier to see these sections. Okay. And then we can offboard the verbosity of C editor here, right? So I get that. I get this is kind of a rationale for the design, and that's good. That's fine. It's just that, you know, maybe so we might want to keep this as well. So we want to put that in there as well. And then I do like C editor, current editor. I mean, that like, this isn't too ugly. But we have it in the summary, right? And this is just a comment that lets me know that dex_eddy is the same as eddy_mod in this library. And I think why I changed it to index of editor rather than editor mode is just that editor mode it doesn't really reflect the fact that it sounds like the editor itself has different modes, but it's actually the editor itself that we have selected. So this, so I thought that this was kind of a bad name, so we used something else. So I mean, let's, you know, it's not like when we open this file, you know, we're not like going, like, right, there's all this empty space here, so since we're not like going past, you know, since we're not even scrolling, right, then I don't see a pressing concern to like really get in here and be like, okay, let's delete this comment, let's delete that, right? It's I think that you know, maybe you could say that this is still excessive comments, but we have all this free space here, so I think we can afford to be a little bit overly verbose, and we can kind of be code hoarders and or comment hoarders and hoard this comment right here instead of pack it away where it belongs. So let's look at the functions for C editor. But first, let's look at this. Yeah, that looks fine. And so the editor functions, there's just one. And right, once again, I want to be explicit when there's no initialization logic. And that's because eventually I'm going to have like a big block where I initialize all the subsystems. And I want to you know, initialize them all in the same in a linear order. And if a system is not initialized, then I want it to have an init none. It'd be like in a classroom when somebody's like, raise your hand if you're not here, you know, like, right? So obviously that is impossible in a classroom to raise your hand if you're not there, but I can kind of do something like that where, you know, in our list where we're initializing everything, we call the init function for something, and then the next one is the next sublibrary, but we call an init none, and that way it doesn't look like we just forgot a subsystem, right? If we have this list of all the systems and one of the systems is missing, pattern-wise, it's going to look like we forgot something, right? And so to make sure it doesn't look like we forgot something, we can have this init none in our list, right? So let's so that looks good here, but let's just take this and let's go into our function documentation. And the C editor was after the iMouse box, so let's go over here and go C editor. Okay. And then we'll take this init none, and right, so you notice that a lot of these things have this, init none. And so, because this is getting duplicated a lot, what I'm going to do, because it's an identical comment, we're going to put some underscores between it, and then we're going to copy it and paste it to all the places where it is used, right? So that way, we can see that explanation, right? And so it's easier to see that it's cut and pasted explanation verbatim, right? No need to say it different ways if it's the same thing, right? So that looks good. We can close that. We can look at our main C file, and we can look at our library chain, and we can see what's next. So after C editor is GenoWin, which is graphics and window. And I will tell you already that this is a clusterfuck because it's code I've used before from other projects, refactored, used with different columns. It's a mess, but let's get to it. So data on the right, functions on the left. So let's go to genowin.data, open that up, and might as well open this one up now. So genowin.functions. Okay, so we got our data here, we got our functions here, we have a to-do, we got some type of explanation, configuration. So this is a lot of code, and I don't really feel like, right, see how this is kind of like a mess here, where we can see where we can obviously see where things have been edited because the alignment is off, where we've like changed the names of these things, right? This indentation looks like we added another namespace. So initially the namespace was probably just GenoWin, and then we added, instead of including GenoWin as external dependency, I was like, let's just make it a sub-library, because sometimes we so I watched John Romero talk about, like, when he starts a new game, don't reuse any of the code, just throw it all away and start from scratch again. And he says that, but then he also says that he reused code from blah, 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 blah. And I think what he means is that rather than in this new project of mine reusing this GenoWin library, we cut and paste this entire library into its own file, and then we reuse it that way. And the reason for that is if I want to make any specific edits to this window library that need to be very specific to this exact game, well, I can do it, right? Because I've cut and pasted it into this project, and I can get away with doing that. Is that bad design? I don't know, but I've definitely encountered needing to do stuff like that. Like, I've used the Flixel library for Flash games, and I definitely encountered times when I had to create edits of the library, but if I didn't want to be a bad programmer, I had to try to figure out how to jerry-rig in changes without touching the original library, and sometimes it can be really hard. So let's avoid that, right? Because, and also, let's say if this is a common library of yours that's going to be reused, now if one project needs this feature in the library, and another project needs this feature, and another project needs that feature, then your reusable library starts to get really bloated because it needs to support all these different use cases. But if we just include this project, this GenoWin, as a sublibrary of our main project, then we are able to edit it to our heart's content without worrying about how it's going to affect other projects. Now the downside is if we make a mistake in this library, that mistake might be in the code we cut and pasted from, right? So you're going to lose some leverage, but what you're going to gain is sanity of mind for the current project you're working on, right? That's how I see it. And so I do that a lot in my OpenSCAD code. So if we do this, I'm going to do like paste short SCAD functions. Let's try that. Nope, I'm going to make that a synonym. Paste short SCAD. Does that work? Okay, that works. So, right, so these are like a whole bunch of like functions and things that I use in every single OpenSCAD project that I use. And every time I do a new OpenSCAD project, I just cut and paste it. And then sometimes I need some slightly different functionality, or I need to refine this snippet. So I'll refine the snippet, and then I'll refine that snippet file, right? And then next time I paste that snippet, it will be a slightly different version for the next project. And each time I paste that snippet into a new project, it's slightly different, right? And it slowly evolves over time. And it's kind of hackish to do it that way, but I find that being like, oh, I can reuse this code and I can reuse this code, and packaging everything into reusable pieces because you can reuse it, I think that's a trap. It's a very alluring trap because you're like, man, I can just write this one piece of code once and then I can forget about it for the rest of my life. And I think that's bad because now you have to make sure that that code works with all these different code bases, right? And if that one piece of code breaks, all those code bases break. Also, you're not getting much practice, right? If you write the piece of code only once and forget about it and then just try to reuse it. And also, if you've written enough utility functions, eventually you just lose track of what all those different utility functions are, and then you can't even find that reusable thing that you wrote anyways, so what the hell is the point of making it reusable if you lose track of it, right? So, I don't know. I think that you should reuse code very sparingly, and sometimes it's better to reuse it in this very dirty kind of way, or at least I think it is. So there should be like a short SCAD 2020. Let me just see what I have here. So file new, short SCAD 2020. Oh, it's SCAD Fun 2020. So we're gonna take this and just say, and we'll just put a little note here of what the date is. So this is 2020-12-04. And that way, if I ever use this shortcut again, if I ever type this exact phrase again, I'm going to see a note of what I actually want to use, and a date stamp for when I created it, and that gives me an idea of how relevant it is, right? The other thing is, since you can have in my shortcuts, I can have unlimited synonyms for everything I'm thinking of, so that's great because effectively I don't have to memorize anything. I can just be like, if I were John Mark, what would John Mark name this shortcut, right? So effectively, if I had like amnesia, my shortcuts would still work because they are just the result of how I would do things, and the universe is deterministic. But the downside of that is you're not going to memorize things very well. If you have 50 different things you could type, then you're not going to memorize your shortcuts. So a lot of times it's good to take all your synonyms and rather than give you exactly what you want right away, have an intermediary that says, no, don't do that, use this. And that way all of those 50 different possibilities that your brain can come up with will all fire this in your brain, right? So you'll get like a stronger neuron connections to exactly this phrase, right? And so you just want to like concentrate things like that so that you can enforce memorization of some of these things. So the idea is that this is trying to augment my memory right? And also, it's just a pain in the ass to have a whole bunch of synonyms. So it's good to converge on one like master keyword. And so usually if it's some type of master keyword, it's in all capitals with underscores. And then things that don't have a permanent definition, I'll use something like this. Anyway, so let's go back to the code here. Okay, over here. So let's close this. I don't know why I had that open. Okay. Oh yeah, we were explaining about cutting and pasting code, listening to John Romero talk about code reuse. So this is a disaster. It's like partially like a library struct, and then partially not, and then like we got like this my data for windowed or with threads with windows, and it's just a disaster. And but the thing is it works, right? So. And at some point in time, we just got to say it works. Let's move the fuck on, right? So you'll notice that some of this code looks a little bit more organized than other. So when I come back to the code, I'll try to write it a little bit more organized. Yeah, this looks like it needs to be cleaned up. So these callbacks, I want to get rid of these callbacks. Because I don't want to have to. We want to write our code without callbacks, and there's two reasons why we want to. Hold on. Okay, so let's make a little note here. Actually, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do a if, and so in our main thing we have a crash on vital to do, right? So if crash on vital to do is greater than or equal to 1, right? And we're going to put in a little note here, because if we don't do this, we're never gonna find it again, It's just going to be there confusing the hell out of somebody else, some other poor soul. So all of this stuff, we have been working on getting rid of all these callbacks. And I'll explain why we're getting rid of callbacks later, after I get this. So error, get rid of these fucking callbacks. Okay, so the reason we're getting rid of these callbacks is, first of all, callbacks make the code like really hard to follow, right? And I think that in some cases, like if I were to make some type of virtual class, then I would use callbacks to implement that, right? I would just wire up the class to a whole bunch of function pointers, and it effectively would be like that would effectively be an instance of a virtual class, and that would be fine, right? But in our case, that's not what we're doing. We have some very tight coupling with our code. We do not need these callbacks. The original reason for these callbacks is because I wanted code from the future to be able to look backwards, right? Now, but that breaks the linear ordering, right? We're trying to keep a very linear order and build on top of things. And but the problem was that I had code where it needed to kind of reach backwards. So for the key presses, right? So or reach forward, I guess. Let me think about it. So in the simplest way I could say this, one way to avoid problems with like dependency loops and dependency cycles, one way to avoid problems with that is to create callbacks, right? So let's say that basically if this window code, if my window code needs to reference code in the future that doesn't exist yet, the one way you could do that is you could just have callbacks within the window code, and then you could wire up those callbacks at a later date, right? But that kind of goes against my philosophy of trying to keep a very strict linear order, right? I'm like trying to like find a loophole to get around this linearity that I'm doing. So that's so one reason why we don't want to do this is so let's actually write down the reasons. So reasons. One, reaching backwards like this from the future violates the okay. And we can keep this outside of a comment because we have this if, right? And it's just gonna crash on us. So we don't really have to worry about that. And then you know, maybe we might want to, we'll see what happens when we run it. So one reason is that, and then two, callbacks make it harder to read and follow the code. Extra indirection, right? It adds extra indirection, right? By using a callback. And then the final reason for why we don't want to use a callback is callbacks force code execution onto the window thread and will okay, so the third reason I don't want to use a callback is because callbacks force code execution onto the window thread and will lead to hard to debug memory concurrency issues eventually, right? So when a key is pressed, I want that to execute some code on my game thread or my rendering thread, and I actually want that thread to be separate from the window thread. Like if I do the window thread in a different window, I want the window thread to just be managing window stuff and not managing anything else, right? But if we wire up keyboard inputs to calling different functions, right, by using callback functions, well, guess what? Because the callback is part of because the window code executes the callback, that means that any executed code is now going to be on that thread, right? So now we might not even realize that we're doing that we're executing all of this game code on the wrong thread, right? We might have these two different threads. We think, great, we have the separation. Oh, it's so nice that, you know, our window runs in this other thread, so we don't have to worry about it or think about it. And then you don't even realize that, you know, half of your code is actually running in a different thread because of that callback structure. So that's the other reason why we're not going to do it. So the way we're going to fix this is that iKeybox and that iMouseBox, that thing was to fix the callback problem and let us get rid of callbacks. So if we look at here, right, we have iKeybox and native key and iMouseBox. And so what's going to happen here is the window is going to set the values, values for the mouse position and what key was pressed, right? And then the window will also need this window code in order to set the values in ikeybox, might need this native key interpreter so that it can just set the character corresponding to the key that was pressed rather than some native Windows code for the key that was pressed. Now the thing is then some code over here, the code over here now, without directly interfacing with GenoWin, which is on a different thread, can look at these values. Now there's still a problem, and the problem is that you're still going to have some memory. You could still run into memory concurrency issues where GenoWin is on a different thread, and it sets, say, the A key over here, and then some of the code over here is trying to listen for the A key, and it doesn't see the A key right away because of memory concurrency issues, and that's a problem, right? But it's going to be, that problem is going to be right at the key press rather than somewhere else. And the memory concurrency is only going to be with the key press rather than with tons of game state, right? We're going to have the memory because this is all on in one thread, and this is on a different thread. If this different thread sets this value here, right, then these that are not on the window thread, if they try to access those values, they might not get the correct values. But getting weird keyboard input is a hell of a lot better than all of these systems and all of the variables for all of these systems having completely weird-ass variables due to cache coherency because they some of their functions were called on the GenoWin thread, and then all of their other functions were called on the main game loop thread, right? So we're trying to mitigate that disaster, right? So there's the other thing we want to do is we want to probably eventually totally get rid of multi-threading the window altogether. But for now, we're going to kind of leave that multi-threading window option in place. Okay, so anyways. So we're trying to document this. Let's keep this error here. So this is kind of like a error directive, so it'll be caught at compile time. And so I'm intentionally triggering a compile time error if we're supposed to crash on vital to-dos. So to-do, I need to get rid of all of this stuff, and I'm pretty sure I already got rid of it, I already refactored it out, but I'm not sure about it. So let's put this in here, and back to the fact of we copied the entire GenoWin and we pasted it into this project as a sublibrary, and we renamed it as AAC2020 GenoWin. Well, why would we do something like that? Doesn't that sound stupid? But the great thing now is we realize that doing callbacks is a stupid-ass thing, and now we can just nuke all of our callbacks and refactor it and tailor this window library specifically to our game, right? And then there's other code, I'm sure, that makes use of callbacks, but we don't have to worry about it because it's in a different copy of the old version of the code, right? Okay. So we have a little summary here, graphics init and window.data, and then this is oh, I see, it's in the GenoWin only handles creation of OpenGL context. Oh, got you. So some of the graphics, we want a nice separation of concerns, but unfortunately, the reality is some of the graphics code needs to be interlaced with the window code. And creating an OpenGL context is part of that. So So that's just what that note is. So let's take... There's no reason to have both of these comments. So let's take this out. And let's paste it in the summary section. Let's make sure that it was indeed... it's after C editor, right? So if we look at this, C editor, then Gina win. Okay, so we can paste this right here, and then we'll work on fixing that up. So Gina win. That probably wasn't the best way to do that. Indent, kind of get rid of all this fancy crap around it, right? We want a nice hierarchy where, do I really need to know it's 7 characters? We've already established that. Maybe we'll keep it. Maybe it'll kind of hint to the fact that everything is exactly that. I don't know. Let's remove the .data. And yeah, that's a good little summary. And then we can go over here in our function code, and we can nuke that out of there. And we still have, like, wow, like a lot of stuff. Well, I guess that's a to-do. Do we want to keep... This is a lot of commentary. See... We're going to call that old Gina win documentation. We're just going to go in here, and we're just going to say, you know what, we're just going to keep on doing this. We're going to go old Gina win documentation. Like, I don't think this is completely I think this is, like, old stuff, and I know kind of, like, why I wrote it. But let's just throw this in here, and this is kind of like, this is ugly as hell. I don't know if I want it in here. I don't know if I want it anywhere. But I mean, like I said, more information rather than less, right? And the idea is that we have these little hashtags so we can easily find all this stuff. So, creation for win that I think was left over from the code previous project. Not sure how event. Okay, and so we can make a little note of what this is about. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, we can do that, and that's good. So just trying to reduce some of the clutter. And also, we put some underscores before this. Okay. And we have a to-do. alt is typically the first function. Let's see. Hashtag, why can't I see my window? Okay, let's put that in here as well. So this is like something a problem I had that I fixed before, so let's just put that in here as well, because I don't think it's something we need to know about right away. But if we if we want to look at that, we can see it, right? Okay, so now we just have this to-do, and the to-do is kind of like let's actually write it like this. I think that's cleaner. And I think we've kind of have that, but maybe not completely yet. This might be kind of done already. This might already be done. Check, and then remove. So I'm pretty sure this is pretty much already done. So I'm not going to put a vital to-do in here because I'm not sure. I think it might already be done. There's just a whole bunch of crap in here. We're not gonna clean up all of this. It's like I don't want to look at it. So let's move on to the data because we didn't look at the data. So configuration. So actually, it probably would be kind of useful to yeah, a lot of this was just a bad idea. You know, let's just take everything anyways, right? Let's just... It might be ugly, but let's just see what we have. And, yeah, so I guess we still have the callbacks in there. We just want to get rid of them altogether, I think. I just think they were a bad idea. Right, because this looks ugly as hell. Simple key, complex key, on mouse move, right? All these different things. Let's just take... I'm not going to take everything in there. It's just a copy of what is in Windows. And there's all this stuff. I don't think I want to worry about this. This is basically ensuring that I can't include Windows.h is what this is, I think. Well, no, we do V, so it's not exactly H module and whatnot. But yeah, let's not copy all of this, because some of this is just like a lot of very specific Windows code, kind of like jerry-rigging stuff in there. Some of these are type defs. Alright, these are type defs. You know what? I don't really feel like, yeah, I don't know what's really useful here. You know what? Yeah, some of this is like, why? Why do I need this? Yeah, so you know what we're gonna do? Well, hold on. Control Z. What did we? Okay, that's all we had in there. Yeah, so let's just save this, and in our documentation for the data for GenoWin, so iMouseBox and then GenoWin, or am I missing something here? I might be missing something here. Let's look at this. Yeah, iMouseBox. So we are missing a lot of documentation for different things here, aren't we? Let's fill this out. So let's so I believe FileBoy just had no data, right? And that's why that's missing. So, but yeah, let's try to. Okay, native key. I swear native key has stuff, so let's take that. So I thought native key has stuff, so let's go look at, oh, got you. No, it's just functions. Yeah. Okay, so that's correct. I just want to make sure. So native data. Native key, iKeybox, iMouseBox, C editor. What about C editor? C editor. I believe this actually has one variable, and it's just the editor index. So if we look at the data for this, let's go look open C editor again. And yeah, so we have just the editor index, right? So in our documentation for the data, index of editor active / in control. Okay, that's all that is. Close that. Let's see what else we got. C editor, and then we're back on GenoWin, right? So in data, let's go to data and GenoWin. And for GenoWin and all the data, I really don't want to Put things here as you need to reference them. Okay, so we're just gonna make a little note here that this library is a complete mess, and we're not gonna fix it. We're just gonna say it's a mess. If there's certain pieces that are valuable that we need to reference, we'll put them in this documentation area. Otherwise, we're just gonna be like, fuck it, right? Because it's too much of a mess, and if it's not broken, good enough for me. Okay, and probably the same thing with the functions. We're gonna say the exact same thing. We're gonna cut and paste. I just don't want to deal with it, so in our data documentation, we'll do the same thing for functions. So we'll take genuine, and in our function documentation for genuine, which comes after C editor, we'll just cut paste this, and then we'll just change these D's right here. Just change those D's to F's, and then we'll be good. That wasn't what I meant to do. Okay. So there's more we could do to fix this all up. But I'm getting kind of tired here. Yeah, so I'd say maybe tomorrow I'll kind of look through more of this and figure out what else needs to be looked at. And we'll just do a little cleanup, We're not going to get it perfect, but we're just going to go through it and kind of off-board commentary from the comments into here, just so that, right, we have like, right, this is a lot of just commentary, right? So it's nice to just get rid of that extra noise in the code and just put it somewhere. Now, you know, that's a bold decision. Is it the right way to go? I don't know. I don't know if there's an exact right way to do anything. There's just like more and less optimal, and then there's always things that are trade-offs. So I don't know. But let's before we stop here, because I think I'm done for now, because I'm just tired of this. But we absolutely want to make sure that one of the big rules here is do not leave your code broken. So we're gonna double click this. We're gonna make sure that we can get it up and running, because while we were refactoring, there's the possibility that we like added a stray multi-line comment character somewhere, or some weird ass thing happened. So let's just have a little sanity check, and it looks like sanity check is we're good, right? We got the project is still working. All the different keys we press are activating the corresponding shaders. So we're good, and we can close this. And then the next thing is we are going to go back to here, and this is kind of an exception to leaving it broken. We're gonna make this a 1, right? So now when we try to run it, we're gonna get that runtime error. So let's see, error. Get rid of these fucking callbacks. Let's say we get rid of these fucking callbacks and say, you know, it's the first time we've ever seen that, and we want to figure out what that's all about, right? So we go find in files, we look for get rid of these fucking callbacks, we go find all, and there's only a result, right? And since there's only one result, we don't have a problem as to where that is, but that's kind of annoying that can we get the So the results window is, it's like, usually you can like move this down. Let's see if we can, let me move it over here really quick. So usually the results window, yeah, is like half the screen. Like, let me show you over here. So usually the results window is like this, and I can like move it up and down like this, but I couldn't over when I had it over here. So let's try to make it smaller here, and then if we move it over here, yeah, that looks better. I don't know why can we move it now? Yeah, I guess something about it like being up there like makes it, I don't know what that's about. That's a weird behavior. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna try this one more time as a little sanity check. Oh wait, it's already open. But okay, let's close that. Let's pretend everything's closed. And do you want to reload it? Yes, I do want to reload it. Okay. So let's say we close everything and we're just trying to look for that, right? And we're going to find in files, find all. And then we can see this, we'll double click it, it opens the file. That line's highlighted, we're good. We can find the problem, right? And we already know the project compiles without doing this, but we just want something that's going to bring to our attention what's on the agenda for things to do, right? So here we're going to close all these, and we're going to close this editor first, and we're going to close all of our text editors actually, except for this one, and we're going to close this one last because we changed the where that window is for the search here, and the settings for how it shows up at this size is probably recorded in some type of configuration variable, and those configuration variables are not persisted until the program is closed. So we have to make sure that this is the last instance of Notepad++ that is closed if we want that particular change to persist in the settings file. So we're gonna close that, and then after we close it, we could open up Notepad again. So so I'll just do over here, I'm gonna just type shortcuts, and that'll open up my Notepad because I usually have shortcuts and stuff associated with that. And let's double check here. So if we do Control H, and we're like, get rid of these fucking whatever, and we search in here, and we do find all, we see get rid of these call. Okay, so we see it, it's the correct size, that's good. So that's good. So let's close this, and now in, oh wait, you can't see that, god damn it. So anyways, I just made sure that the editor I just made sure that some of the settings with my editor were correct after I closed them. And now, the other thing that I might not have shown you, so let's make sure that I showed you, is before we commit this, we're gonna set crash on vital to do to 1, so that way when we run the project, right, when we run this project again, we're gonna see error, get rid of these fucking callbacks, right? So when I say don't leave the code in a broken state, I mean don't leave it in like an unrecoverably broken state. So this is obviously a broken state, but we know that once we get rid of that flag, you won't see that. So it's just a way to that if I end up not touching this for another month for some reason, and I try to run this, I'll know exactly where I need to pick things up again. So we're going to do git bash here, and we're going to do git status, and we probably see like a lot of stuff has changed, and we'll say git add dot, and then we do git commit -am, and we'll say that formatting plus documentation. Right, formatting and documentation is all we did here. And by formatting, I just mean a non-functional code changes, very superficial code changes, formatting might not be the best word to describe what we just did, but we basically just moved around comment characters, right? And moved around comment characters, I don't know if that's kind of a odd explanation, right? So formatting and documentation is a better summary. Some people will say that saying what you did in a comment is bad because, oh, the commit comment should always be why you did something, not what you did, because you can see that in the Git logs. I'm gonna have to disagree with that. You know, just because you can see this in the summaries of in your GitHub, you can see the summaries. So I think knowing what you did is also important, because look at all these files you just touched, right? I would rather not have to look at each one of those individual files to figure out what I did, right? I'd rather just be, oh, formatting documentation, that's what I did. Okay, woo, right? So let's commit that. Or not commit, sorry. Yeah, commit, and then we'll push it. So, clear. Okay. And we can also, you know, since we're at it, why don't we just go to GitHub really quick and check out what we got in our library. And also, this is private, I believe. I don't know, if somebody eventually asked me to see this, then I don't know, maybe I'll let them see it. So www.github.com, and let's do AAC2020. So why does it think I have C++? What does it think is C++? Oh, actually, yeah, that is, okay, yeah, I see. That's a dependency. And it has, like, a C++ mode. So that makes sense. Shell, it thinks shell because that's the way I can, like, build things. 19 days ago, last month, 17 days ago. Last month was my first commit, huh? Okay. So it hasn't been going very long, but I've just been trying to figure things out. Okay, yeah, so that's good. I'm good there. And I'm done now because I just, I didn't really want to code anymore. I just wanted to get an idea of where everything was, and then we'll keep on going through, we'll keep on going through everything until we get through every single system in the game, and then once we've gone through every single system, we'll figure out what other code needs to be added. But for now, we just want to get our bearings to make sure that we don't accidentally add things that go against the design or add things that are already there. Yeah, so later, I'm out of here.